How did Native Americans survive cold nights? Their methods are still impressive today. Imagine a night when the temperature drops so low that metal becomes brittle and your breath freezes in the air. In such conditions, without modern equipment, sleeping bags, and high-tech clothing, spending the night outdoors seems like certain death. However, for the indigenous peoples of North America, this was not an extreme situation, but a normal part of life, an art refined over thousands of years. They did not fight the cold. They understood it and used its laws to their advantage. Their knowledge of nature allowed them to turn snow, branches, and animal skins into a reliable shelter capable of preserving life in the most severe frost. It was a quiet wisdom where every step, from choosing a place to laying a bed, was crucial. Watch the video to the end to find out why the most important element for survival in the snow was not fire, but what lay beneath their feet, and how it was possible to build a warm house using the frost itself as a building material. What if I told you that the main enemy in the winter forest is not the frosty air, but the ground beneath your feet? It is the ground, not the wind, that draws heat from the body at an astonishing rate through direct contact. Ancient peoples understood this fundamental law of physics without any formulas, based solely on the experience of generations. Therefore, preparing a place to sleep did not begin with building walls, but with creating a barrier between the body and the frozen ground. First, all the snow was raked off the selected area down to the ground. This was done in order to create a dry and level base for the future bed. Then the most painstaking stage began, the creation of an insulating bedding. Any available materials capable of retaining air were used. The ideal option was spruce or pine branches, which were cut and laid in a thick, springy layer. The thickness of this layer was critically important and could reach 30 or even 50 centimeters. Laid crosswise, the branches created many air pockets. It was this immobile air that became the main insulator, preventing body heat from escaping into the ground. On top of the coniferous branches, the next layer was laid. Dry grass, moss, or fallen leaves, which were collected in advance. This layer made the bed softer and filled in the remaining voids, improving insulation. The result was a kind of natural mattress, perfectly suited to the conditions of the wild. Only after the foundation was ready were skins, such as bison or deer, spread on top. The first served as the last, warmest layer, in direct contact with the body. This multi-layered system was so effective that it allowed people to sleep warm, even in severe frost. They knew that without such bedding, even the warmest shelter and the best clothing would be useless. The body in contact with the cold ground would lose heat faster than it could produce it. This was the first and foremost rule of survival on a winter night. This approach demonstrates a deep understanding of the principles of heat transfer. Modern tourists use expensive polyurethane foam mats for the same purpose, but the essence remains the same. Insulation from the ground is more important than insulation from the air. This ancient method is not just a way to survive, but a whole philosophy of harmonious interaction with nature. It teaches us that everything we need for life is already around us. We just need to be able to see it and use it correctly. We are very interested in hearing your point of view. Do you think this ancient knowledge can be useful to modern people who are accustomed to technology? Write about it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Want to know the secret that allowed people to sleep in the snow covered by just one blanket? The answer lies in the unique properties of materials provided by nature. Primarily bison hides. For the tribes of the Great Plains, bison hides were not just clothing or bedding, but a true technological marvel. The secret to its effectiveness lay in the structure of the fur. The thick, dense undercoat created a thick layer of still air that retained body heat. The long, stiff guard hairs protected the undercoat from moisture and snow, preventing it from getting wet. But the main property that distinguished natural fur from modern synthetic materials was its ability to breathe. Microscopic pores in the skin allowed moisture evaporated by the body during sleep to escape. This was critical for survival. If the moisture remained inside, it would condense and the insulation undercoat would get wet. Wet insulation instantly loses its insulating properties and, moreover, begins to draw heat from the body. Sleeping in a wet sleeping bag at sub-zero temperatures is a direct path to death. This is why indigenous peoples never slept completely naked under their skins. Contrary to popular belief, they kept their deerskin clothing on. This clothing absorbed excess sweat and gradually released it to the outside, where the moisture evaporated through the breathable skin. Bison hides were used as a multifunctional system. One hide was laid on an insulating bed of branches with the fur facing up, creating a warm and soft bed. Another hide, larger and warmer, was used as a blanket. Often, one large hide was used for 2 or 3 people to sleep on. This not only saved a valuable resource, but also allowed them to use each other's body heat. In such conditions, people warmed each other, creating a comfortable microclimate under the hide. The size and weight of the bison skin also played a role. Being heavy, it fit snugly against the body, leaving no gaps through which warm air could escape. It created a kind of cocoon that provided reliable protection from the cold. This seemingly simple household item was actually the result of centuries of evolution and a deep understanding of materials. People knew how to tan the skin properly to preserve its elasticity and thermal insulation properties. It was a real craft on which the life of the entire tribe depended. The art of using furs was the basis for survival in the harsh climate. But even the warmest skin cannot protect you from the icy wind. In the next chapter, we will learn how an ordinary snowdrift could be used to build a real winter fortress. What I am about to show you breaks all preconceptions about construction. What could be colder than snow? However, it was the peoples of the subarctic, such as the Cree and Athabascan, who turned it into a reliable and surprisingly warm shelter called a quingzi. These dwellings did not just protect from the cold. They allowed people to live and hunt in harsh conditions, where temperatures often dropped below 40 degrees below zero. For those who lived in the endless snowy expanses, snow was not an enemy, but an ally. It provided not only shelter, but also a way to survive where it seemed impossible to survive. The idea behind this structure is ingenious in its paradoxicality, using the coldest material as insulation. But this was precisely the wisdom of the northern peoples. They understood that there was no need to fight nature. They needed to use its forces to their advantage. Freshly fallen snow consists of many small snowflakes, between which a huge amount of air is trapped. And as we already know, still air is one of the best heat insulators available to humans. That is why it was possible to stay inside a snow dwelling without the risk of freezing, even if a blizzard was raging outside. The construction of a kuzin began with the simplest thing, creating a huge snowdrift. Snow was raked with shovels or hands, sometimes with the help of deer skins, into a large pile reaching human height or even higher. The diameter of the base could be 3 to 4 meters. It was very important to choose the right snow, not too loose and not too icy, so that the structure would be dense but not fragile. The masters of kuzin construction knew how to feel the snow. By its sound and how it compressed under their hands, they could tell whether it was suitable for the job. When the snowdrift was ready, one of the most amazing stages began. It was left to mature. At first glance, this looked like inaction, but it was during this time that an important physical transformation took place. Under the influence of the sun and their own weight, the snow crystals gradually fused together. This process, called agglomeration, turned the loose mass into a dense, homogeneous structure. Sometimes people even lightly tamped down the surface with their feet or skins to speed up the compaction. After several hours of waiting, the snowdrift turned into a kind of snow slab, light but strong, like a building material. Checking readiness was simple. If a stick could be inserted into the snow with effort, it was possible to move on to the next step. Now the most difficult and responsible part began, hollowing out the interior. First, a small entrance tunnel was cut into the bottom of the snowdrift. It served not only as a door, but also as an important part of the thermal system. Since warm air always rises, the low entrance prevented it from escaping. This simple solution maintained a surprisingly stable temperature inside. The workers moved inward, carefully removing snow and forming rounded walls and a vaulted ceiling. Each blow had to be precise. Too strong a movement could collapse the vault. To ensure that the walls were of uniform thickness, thin sticks of the same length were installed outside in advance. When the tip appeared from the inside, the builders knew they had reached the desired level. The walls were usually about 30 centimeters thick, which was enough to provide complete protection from the wind and cold. Sometimes, if the snow was particularly dense, the walls were made slightly thinner to increase the interior space. The acoustics inside the Kuzan were amazing. Any sounds were reflected off the snow walls, and even whispers could be heard clearly. As soon as the dome was ready, silence and warmth reigned inside. The snow walls acted as a powerful insulator, completely blocking the wind. The heat of the human body and breath raised the temperature inside to 0 degrees, and sometimes higher. It seemed like a real miracle, because outside it was minus 40 degrees. If there were 2 or 3 people in the Qingxi, the heat from their breath and bodies was enough to melt the thinnest layer of snow on the inner surface. This layer immediately froze, turning into a thin layer of ice that strengthened the structure. Thus, with each passing day, the dwelling became stronger. However, comfort and safety required compliance with the rules. Without ventilation, it was possible to suffocate in a closed snow house. Therefore, a small hole was always made in the upper part of the dome. It served as an outlet for carbon dioxide and excess moisture. Sometimes the hole was covered with a piece of moss or fabric so that it could be adjusted depending on the weather. This simple but vital engineering solution saved many lives in the Arctic conditions. Qingxi is the pinnacle of the art of survival. It shows how a deep knowledge of nature and observation can turn an enemy into an ally. For the inhabitants of the north, snow was not just precipitation, but a universal building material available everywhere and at any time. These houses save people from wind, blizzards, and cold, allowing them to spend the night in the harshest conditions. A Kuzan is not just a shelter, it is a symbol of how man can subdue the elements without destroying them, but using them according to the laws of nature itself. It is a house built from the frost itself, and that is its genius. Are you ready for the shocking truth about how fire can keep you warm outdoors? In the modern imagination, a campfire in the forest is a small flame around which tourists sit, roast food, and sing songs. But for those who have tried to survive in a real winter forest, this would not be enough. To spend the night in 30-degree frost, it was not enough to simply build a fire. It was necessary to construct an entire heating system in which every detail mattered. This is how the idea of a long fire and a heat reflector was born, a method that could save lives even in the harshest conditions. This method was often used by the peoples of the North American forest zone, such as the Iroquois and Algonquins, during hunting expeditions. They knew very well that a closed shelter did not always help. Smoke, carbon monoxide, and lack of air could make it dangerous. Therefore, they set up camp in the open air, where warmth was provided not by walls, but by a well-designed fire. A properly organized fire not only kept them from freezing, but also allowed them to feel relatively comfortable, even when the snow crunched under their feet and the wind howled in the treetops. The first thing they did was to build a lean-to shelter, the simplest single-slope canopy proven over centuries. 2 long sticks were stuck into the snow, and a crossbar was fixed between them. Poles were leaned against it at an angle, forming a sloping wall, which was thickly covered with spruce branches or birch bark. The result was a sturdy structure that protected against wind and falling snow. Sometimes another layer of snow was added on top to reinforce the insulation. It was important to position the shelter with its back to the prevailing wind so that the airflow would not blow inside and extinguish the fire. And now the magic began. Right in front of the canopy, parallel to its open side, the famous long fire was lit. This was not an ordinary fire, but a whole line of heat. Logs several meters long were laid next to each other, forming an extended flame that could burn for hours. To prevent the fire from burning too quickly, 3 thick logs were used, 2 at the bottom and 1 at the top. A small space was left between them for air circulation, and the flames smoldered slowly, giving off an even and gentle heat. Such a fire did not require constant feeding with wood. It was enough to adjust the logs from time to time. However, even the most powerful fire would lose most of its energy if the heat simply escaped into the forest. Therefore, hunters invented a heat reflector, a solution that was ingenious in its simplicity. On the side of the fire opposite the canopy, they built a wall of logs, stones, or packed snow. The height of such a reflector could reach 1.5 meters. It not only reflected the heat back to the people, but also protected the flames from gusts of wind, creating a stable microclimate between the fire and the shelter. The wind would have extinguished the flames, but now it passed over the structure without interfering with the spread of heat. The physics here are simple, but remarkably effective. Infrared radiation from the fire was reflected off the surface of the reflector and directed straight under the canopy. Thus, a zone of constant radiant heat was created between the fire and the shelter. It was like warming yourself between two fireplaces. One a living flame, the other its mirror image. People lying on a thick layer of fir branches found themselves in a cozy pocket of warmth where they could sleep, dry their clothes, or cook food without fear of the cold. The most amazing thing was that even in severe frost, people could sleep without heavy furs. On one side, the body was warmed by the direct heat of the fire, and on the other, by the reflected heat from the wall. The temperature in the area between the canopy and the reflector could be above zero, while just a few steps away, the cold set in. To increase efficiency, small snow walls were sometimes built on the sides to prevent the heat from escaping. This turned the camp into a real thermo capsule in the open air. This type of camp required a lot of fuel, as the long fire consumed wood continuously. Therefore, the location was chosen in advance, closer to dry wood, where fallen trees could be found. Sometimes they would gather firewood during the day, stacking it near the camp. Despite being labor-intensive, this method was considered the safest. It allowed them to sleep without the risk of suffocation, as often happened in closed dugouts or huts without ventilation. In addition, the open flame provided light, scared away animals, and made it possible to keep an eye on the surroundings. For hunters and travelers of that time, fire was not just a source of heat. It was the heart of the camp, a living being that needed to be cared for. It was kindled with respect and understanding, choosing the right fuel, adjusting the intensity, and throwing logs at the right angle. Controlling fire was a real art on which life depended. But even the hottest fire won't save you if you're wearing the wrong clothes. After all, heat can be created, but it's important to keep it. Do you think ancient clothing was really so effective that it could compete with modern winter jackets? In the next chapter, you will learn why fur, leather, and grass could protect against the cold just as well as, and sometimes even better than, synthetic materials. The clothing of indigenous peoples for the cold season was not just a set of items, but a well-thought-out, multi-layered system. Each element of this system performed its own function, working in harmony with the others. It was based on a principle that is used today by manufacturers of the best tourist equipment. The principle of multi-layering. The bottom layer, closest to the body, was often made of soft, moisture-wicking materials. These could be shirts made of finely tanned deerskin or even woven from plant fibers. Its job was to wick sweat away from the body, keeping the skin dry. The main insulating layer was clothing made of skins with fur on the inside. Rabbit skins or other small furry animals were often used for this purpose. The fur close to the body created a thick air layer that retained heat very well. The top layer served a protective function. It was sewn from durable and dense deer or elk skin, tanned without fur. This layer did not so much warm as protect from wind, snow, and mechanical damage, protecting the insulation underneath. Moccasins were a key element of winter footwear. They were made of thick but elastic moose or deer skin, which did not harden in the cold. Winter moccasins were taller and roomier than summer ones, so that a thick insulating insole could be inserted inside. Dry grass, moss, or rabbit fur was used as insulation for moccasins. The feet were wrapped in soft, thin leather footcloths and then inserted into moccasins stuffed with insulation. This system kept the feet warm and dry. An important detail was mittens. They were also sewn from leather with fur inside. Unlike gloves, in mittens the fingers are together and warm each other, which is much more effective in severe frost. Headgear was made from beaver, fox, or wolf fur. It reliably protected the head and ears from frostbite. Often, additional flaps were attached to the hat, which could be lowered to cover the neck and cheeks. The cut of the clothing was also well thought out. It was loose enough not to restrict movement and allow air to circulate between the layers. This helped to avoid overheating during physical activity and subsequent dangerous cooling. This entire system was the result of thousands of years of experience and adaptation to harsh conditions. It was perfectly suited to the local climate and available materials. It was a true second skin that allowed a person to feel part of nature rather than fighting against it. What if I told you that improper breathing during sleep could lead to death? It sounds incredible, but in the conditions of the real Arctic cold, even such a natural process as breathing became a dangerous factor that could cost a person their life. The moisture contained in exhaled air became an invisible enemy at low temperatures. People who did not understand this could wake up in the morning with frozen clothes, wet skins, and deadly cold inside their shelter. In the frosty tundra, a mistake related to breathing alone could cost more than an unsuccessfully lit fire. When a person sleeps covered with furs or skins, their breath produces warm, moist air. This moisture is harmless under normal conditions, but in the cold it becomes a trap. Exhaled air comes into contact with cold surfaces, the walls of the shelter, the ceiling, or even the edge of a fur hood. The moisture instantly condenses and freezes, turning into a thin layer of frost. Over several hours of sleep, this frost gradually builds up, forming a dense layer of ice crystals. Sometimes in the morning, you could see the entire inner dome of the shelter glistening as if covered with a silvery crust. At first glance, it seemed beautiful, but behind it lay a deadly danger. The problem began when a person accidentally touched the frost in their sleep, or when the temperature inside the shelter rose slightly due to body heat and breathing. The frost melted and water dripped down, soaking sleeping skins, furs, or clothing. After a few minutes, the moisture turned to cold, and after an hour, to ice. Wet clothing lost its insulating properties and began to draw heat away from the body. In the Arctic climate, this meant one thing: hypothermia and death. People who had lived their lives in the snow understood that dryness was more important than warmth, which is why controlling breathing became one of the rules of survival. The indigenous peoples of the North and subarctic zones developed simple but ingenious ways to combat this threat. The first rule sounded paradoxical: never cover your head. No matter how much you wanted to hide from the cold, your face always remained uncovered. This allowed moist air to escape freely without settling on the furs. Of course, the face froze and the cheeks went numb, but that was the lesser of two evils. Human skin is quite resistant to cold. It can withstand frost, especially if there is no strong wind. But wet clothes or wet fur meant instant heat loss. To prevent your breath from burning your lungs, your nose and mouth were covered with fur, a piece of cloth, or a scarf. This was a kind of heat filter. It partially retained moisture and heated the air before it entered the lungs. On frosty nights, an ice crust formed on this filter, which had to be cleaned from time to time. But even with this inconvenience, it saved lives. Some hunters used a fur mask with a narrow opening for the mouth to reduce heat loss, but still did not cover their faces completely. In enclosed shelters, such as quingies or snow caves, ventilation was a matter of life and death. A small hole, a ventilation duct, was always made in the ceiling. It served two purposes. It released carbon dioxide and moist air rising upwards. Even if the outside temperature dropped to -40 degrees, this tiny channel was never completely closed. People knew that a closed dwelling would become a trap. Moist air with no outlet created condensation that settled on the walls, and the lack of oxygen caused headaches and suffocation. This principle was so effective that it is still used today. Modern winter tents, mountaineering shelters, and even rescue capsules have ventilation valves. Archaeologists believe that ancient peoples understood the physics of air no worse than engineers, albeit at the level of observation. They knew that warm air rises and cold air descends, and they knew how to control this convection, creating a healthy microclimate even in permafrost conditions. There was another trick. Don't sleep directly on the ground or snow, but slightly above it. Cold and humid air always accumulates at the bottom, near the floor or entrance. Therefore, the sleeping place was raised at least 20 to 30 centimeters on a layer of branches, skins, or snow. This small distance was of great importance. The air above remained drier and warmer, and people slept in more comfortable conditions. Sometimes a special platform, similar to a couch, was made inside the shelter so as not to touch the cold ground. Each of these details, breathing, ventilation, bed height, might seem insignificant, but in reality, life depended on them. These small details show how accurately and deeply ancient people understood the world around them. They did not have instruments or thermometers. But they knew how heat, air, and moisture worked. Their survival was based not on brute force, but on attention to detail and observation. But even the perfect shelter and the right clothing are useless if the wrong place is chosen for the night. Sometimes it was the choice of location that determined whether you would survive until morning. Where do you think is the best place to set up camp in a winter forest? In the next chapter, we'll talk about the strategy of choosing a campsite, an art on which the life of every traveler depended. Choosing a place to spend the night in winter conditions was no less important than building the shelter itself. A mistake of a few meters could cost not just discomfort, but your life. In a frosty forest, the right place became a shield between man and the forces of nature. Indigenous peoples, who had lived in harsh climates for centuries, knew how to read the landscape. By the shape of the branches, the direction of the snow, and the behavior of the smoke, they understood where they could stop and where they could not even stay for an hour. The first and most important rule was protection from the wind. Frost is dangerous in itself, but the wind turns it into a merciless enemy. It blows the warmth out of clothing, cools the body several times faster, and makes even a slight sub-zero temperature deadly. Therefore, camps were never set up on hilltops, open glades, or frozen lakes. A dense coniferous grove was considered the ideal shelter. Spruce and pine branches with their dense crowns created a natural wall that dampened gusts of wind and retained heat. Under such a canopy, the air was noticeably warmer and quieter. The snow fell softly instead of blowing in your face. The features of the terrain also played an important role. A good place was found on the leeward side of a hill or at the foot of a rocky outcrop, where the ground provided additional protection. Sometimes camps were set up in shallow ravines if they were dry and safe. But you had to be careful with this. In the mountains, any depression could become an avalanche channel. An experienced person always checked the direction of the slopes, the density of the snow, and the presence of fresh cracks, signs of a potential avalanche. Safety was prioritized over comfort. The second key factor was the proximity of resources, especially dry firewood. Without fuel, there was no heat, and without heat, there was no life. Therefore, when choosing a place, they always paid attention to the surrounding forest. The most suitable areas were those with dry but not fallen trees nearby. Such trunks, light gray with peeling bark, remained dry because they did not touch the ground. Unlike fallen trees, which were saturated with moisture, they ignited easily and burned for a long time. Sometimes dry trees were specially marked in advance if an overnight hunt was planned. The third rule was to avoid lowlands and frozen river valleys. It would seem that it would be warmer near water or in a secluded place, but this is a deceptive impression. Cold air, which is heavier than warm air, flows down and accumulates in such places. On a windless night, the temperature at the bottom of a ravine could be 5 or 7 degrees lower than on its slope. Therefore, a tent pitched slightly higher could save you from hypothermia. In nature, every meter mattered. Special attention was paid to snow cover. If the construction of a snow shelter, a quinsy, snow pit, or cave was planned, loose, deep snow was required. The best snowdrifts were found in areas where the wind had blown snow from open spaces, such as at the edge of a forest or at the foot of a hill. The snow was tested simply. If it could be squeezed in the hand and did not crumble, it was suitable for construction. Proximity to a water source was considered convenient, but not essential. If there was a fire, water could always be obtained by melting the top layer of clean snow. The bottom layer, adjacent to the ground, often contained dirt, needles, and pieces of bark, so it was avoided. Some hunters even harvested snow blocks during the day, putting them in bags and melting them as needed. Choosing a location was not just a matter of practice, it was an art form. It was necessary to take into account the direction of the wind, the density of the snow, the proximity of firewood, the shape of the terrain, and even the trajectory of the sun so that the morning rays would fall on the camp. All this was done intuitively, without maps or instruments. An experienced person felt the space rather than analyzed it. That is why a winter camp, well chosen and properly arranged, became an island of life amid the silent cold. Everything mattered here, from the position of the fire to the height of the bedding. In the next chapter, we will examine how this knowledge was transformed into a system of rules that allowed people not just to survive, but to live in harmony with winter. To effectively withstand the deadly cold, the human body needs energy and in very large quantities, thousands of calories a day. Internal metabolism is a biological furnace that continuously warms us from within at 36.6 degrees, and in order for it to work smoothly in the cold, it needs to be constantly fed with high-calorie fuel in the form of food. The winter diet of the indigenous peoples of the North was perfectly adapted by evolution and experience to this critical task of thermogenesis. The production of heat through food. Food was not just nutrition, but fuel for survival. Without calories, the body cooled down and died of hypothermia, even in clothing and by the fire, because the internal fire of metabolism went out without fuel, leaving a person defenseless against the cold outside. The basis of the calorie-rich diet of indigenous peoples was food with the highest possible content of animal fats and proteins. Meat. Fat is the most energy-dense source of calories in nature, 9 calories per gram compared to 4 in proteins and carbohydrates, which is slowly digested, providing the body with stable energy for long hours without sugar spikes. It was fatty, high-calorie food that allowed them to effectively maintain their body temperature in the bitter cold of -30 degrees, when the body burned 4,000, 5,000 calories a day just for heating and movement. Fat was not the enemy of health, as modern medicine teaches, but a lifesaver. The fattier the food, the longer a person remained full and warm, which was critical in conditions where the next meal could be a day or more away due to an unsuccessful hunt. The main and indispensable source of such high-calorie food was the constant hunting of large game. The meat of bison, deer, elk, caribou, and beaver was naturally rich in protein for muscles and fat for energy in the right proportions. Hunters especially valued internal organs, liver, kidneys, brains, and bone marrow from tubular bones, which contained the highest concentration of nutrients, vitamins, and minerals. The organs were eaten first, with muscle meat coming second. An instinctive understanding of nutritional value without science, proven by generations of health, where those who ate organs survived and reproduced, passing on the tradition, and those who ignored it became ill and died out from deficiencies. Since successful hunting in winter was extremely unpredictable and unreliable, days without prey, careful preparation of supplies in the fall was of great importance for survival. One of the key products for guaranteed survival was the legendary pemmican. This unique and ingenious invention of the Plains Indians can be described, without exaggeration, as an ancient high-calorie energy bar, comparable in effectiveness to modern ones. Pemmican was a strategic reserve. Armies stocked up on it for months, knowing that with it they would not starve even in the most extreme conditions, where ordinary food would spoil in a matter of days and hunting was impossible for weeks. Pemmican was carefully prepared from lean bison or deer meat that was dried in the summer sun or over a fire and ground into a fine powder. This meat powder was then mixed with melted hot animal fat, lard or fat from the hump of a bison, in a ratio of approximately 1:1 by weight for maximum calorie content. Dried berries, blueberries, cranberries, were often added to the thick mixture for flavor, sweetness, and critical vitamin C to prevent scurvy, which killed those who ate only meat without plant foods for months. Berries were not a luxury, but a medical necessity. Without them, gums rotted, teeth fell out, wounds did not heal, and people died of scurvy with a belly full of meat. A paradox that the Indians solved empirically by adding berries, unaware of vitamins, but seeing the results on their health. The resulting dense fatty mass of pemmican was tightly packed into leather bags made from bison stomachs, squeezing out the air and left to harden in the cold into a solid briquette. In this sealed form, pemmican could be stored for years, even decades, without refrigeration, without spoiling or losing its nutritional value. Ideal preservation without chemicals. A small piece of this concentrated product, about the size of a fist, provided a huge amount of energy, 1,000 plus calories, necessary for long journeys through deep snow and constant struggle with the cold. Pemmican was fuel, not food. It was eaten not for pleasure, but for survival when there was nothing else, and it saved people from starvation, being tasteless but nutritious to the point of efficiency. Such a high-fat diet was not just a random selection of available foods, but a survival strategy in extreme conditions that had been refined over thousands of years. It provided the body with absolutely everything it needed: calories, proteins, fats, vitamins, to produce internal heat through thermogenesis and remain physically strong in the harshest natural conditions. It was a true empirical science of nutrition for cold weather, born of a deep intuitive understanding of the body's needs without microscopes or laboratories. Knowledge gained through trial and error, and the deaths of those who made mistakes, leaving alive those who ate right and passed on their knowledge to their descendants orally and by example. Survival in extreme conditions was rarely the lot of individuals. Humans are social creatures, and in the harsh winter world, this quality became one of their main advantages. The collective survival strategy made it possible to solve problems that were impossible for one person alone. The most obvious example is shared warmth. In a large teepee or Iroquois longhouse, the heat from a single hearth and from the bodies of many people created a comfortable microclimate. But the same principle worked in small groups sleeping in temporary shelters. Several people sleeping side by side under one or more bison skins lost significantly less heat than if they had slept alone. They literally warmed each other, creating a common warm cocoon. It is a simple law of physics. The larger the volume of the body, the slower it cools down. Building a shelter was also a collective task. Gathering wood for a long fire, hauling snow for a quinzhee, or chopping pine branches for bedding, all of this was much faster and more efficient to do together. The division of responsibilities saved everyone's precious time and energy. The safety of the camp was also ensured collectively. While some slept, others could keep the fire going or stand guard. This was especially important in places where there could be dangerous predators or hostile groups of people. Knowledge and experience were also shared. There was always someone in the group who was better at building shelters, someone who was a more successful hunter, and someone who knew the healing properties of plants. Sharing this knowledge increased everyone's chances of survival. Even psychologically, it was easier to be in a group. A sense of camaraderie, mutual support, and a common goal helped to combat fear and despair. One person in a winter forest could quickly lose heart, but the group maintained a fighting spirit. This collective approach was the basis of their entire way of life. It manifested itself not only in extreme situations, but also in everyday life. The success of the tribe depended on how well its members could work together. Thus, the warmth of the group is not only a physical concept, it is also the warmth of human relationships, mutual assistance, and shared responsibility. It was these invisible bonds that often proved to be the most reliable shelter from the icy breath of winter. All of the techniques and methods described would be useless without one crucial component: mental resilience. Surviving in the cold is primarily a battle of the mind, not the body. Panic and fear could kill a person faster than the most severe frost. Indigenous peoples were raised from childhood in conditions that shaped this inner core. They did not perceive nature as an enemy to be defeated. They saw it as their home, which must be understood and respected. The key elements of their psychology were calmness and methodicalness. In any situation, even the most critical, they acted without fuss, step by step, doing what they had been taught since childhood. They knew that panic leads to wrong decisions and a waste of energy. They trusted their knowledge and experience. When a person knows exactly how to build a shelter, start a fire, and find food, they have no reason to be afraid. Their confidence is based not on blind hope, but on real skills. Conserving energy was another principle. They avoided unnecessary movements and extra work. Every action was measured and effective, aimed at achieving a specific goal, preserving warmth and life. They knew how to endure discomfort. Cold, hunger, and fatigue were their constant companions, and they learned to accept them as a given, not allowing them to break their will. It was a form of meditation, the ability to detach from physical suffering and focus on the task at hand. A deep spiritual connection with the surrounding world also gave them strength. They believed that the spirits of their ancestors and nature were helping them. This belief gave hope and meaning to their struggle for life. Ultimately, their main secret to survival was their worldview. They were not just guests in this world, but an integral part of it. Every tree, every snowdrift, and every animal was understandable and familiar to them. This mental fortitude based on knowledge, calmness, and respect for nature was their invisible shield. It allowed them to go through trials that seem unimaginable to modern man. Without this inner fire, all external tricks would be meaningless. We have touched upon the world of ancient knowledge, where survival was not a feat, but an art honed to perfection. Sleeping in the snow was possible for Native Americans not because of superhuman abilities, but because of a deep understanding of the laws of nature. Insulation from the ground, breathable furs, snow houses, and the proper use of fire are all parts of a single, harmonious system. These lessons show that the most effective solutions are often the simplest. They teach us that a person's main resources have always been their mind, observation skills, and ability to live in harmony with the world around them, rather than fighting it. This is wisdom that remains relevant today. What other aspects of the life and customs of indigenous peoples would you like to see in our next videos? Suggest your topics in the comments because they help us create content that is interesting to you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new journeys into the past.